Indonesian Foreign Policy 2017.
Berbagai
We will soon start the opening session. For all attendees who are still outside, please kindly make your way to the main hall and have a seat. I would like to also make some announcements regarding this event. First, the restrooms are located on the right side of the main hall, and the musola is located upstairs in the Martinique room. And second, we encourage everyone to please share your moments here from CIFP 2017 by posting your thoughts and your pictures to your social media channels through Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram by using the hashtag CIFP 2017, and don't forget to mention at FPC Indo. Once again, welcome to the Conference on Indonesian Foreign Policy 2017, and please kindly have a seat. We will start the opening session in a moment.
Ngapain aku ambil ya?
2017. Please kindly take a seat and please kindly fill the seats in the front row first, and then you can make your way to the back once it has been filled. Once again, please fill out the front row first of the seats, and then we can fill out the back row as well. And once again, welcome to the Conference on Indonesian Foreign Policy 2017. And we will start the opening session in just a moment.
Nanti itu kalau Kylie kan awalnya tadi ada video kan, dia nggak mau ada video, jadi disebutkan aja ini. Oke. Bionya aku taruh di sini ya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu and may God bless us all. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sarah Wayne, and it's an honor for me to be your master of ceremony for today's opening session. First, let me extend a warm welcome to the founder of FPCI, Ambassador Dino Patijalal, the Minister of Youth and Sports Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. Hairi Jamaluddin, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN Secretariat, Dr. Mohtan, Director General of ASEAN, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Jose Tavares, co-founder of FPCI, Professor Dewi Fortuna Anwar, Dean of Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore, Professor Kishore Mahbubani, government officials, ambassadors, and ladies and gentlemen. Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia proudly presents Conference on Indonesian Foreign Policy 2017, Winning ASEAN, Conquering Globalization. CIFP 2017 is made possible today with the strong support of our sponsors, Sinarmas, April, Indonesia Morowali Industrial Park, Mulia Group, Sampurna, the Australian Embassy, Bank Mayapada, MTech, Tokopedia, and our media partner, Net Media Tama. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to the main agenda of the session, let us rise together to sing the national anthem of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya, followed by ASEAN anthem, the ASEAN Way. you may now be seated. And ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for LSPR Choir.
There come times when we hear the certain call, when the world must come together as one. There are people dying. It's time to lend a hand to life, the greatest gift of all.
We can go on pretending day by day that someone somehow will soon make a change. We are all a part of God's great big family, and the truth, you know, love is all we need. We are the world, we are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day, so let's start giving. There's a choice to make it. We're saving our own lives. It should make a better day, just you and me. Send them your heart, so you know that someone cares, and their life will be stronger and free, as God has shown us by turning stones to bread. So we all must lend a helping hand. We are the world, we are the children. I'm not gonna spend it. Everyone thinks I'm on the man. They're trying to make me go to rehab. I said no, no, no. Yes, I'll be back, but when I come back, no, no, no. I ain't got the time. Now if I let it fix, I'm fine. They're trying to make me go to rehab. I wanna go, go, go.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give another warm applause for LSPR Choir. Ladies and gentlemen, since it was founded in 2014, Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia actively promotes positive Indonesian internationalism both domestically and abroad. And this initiative relies on the participation of nearly 25 FPCI chapters that has been established in universities all across Indonesia. Please give a round of applause for the 25 FPCI chapters that has been established all across the country. And one of such chapter is from the London School of Public Relations, Jakarta, which choir team we have watched together the performance of. And ladies and gentlemen, FPCI actively promotes Indonesia's positive internationalism through various activities. And to take a closer look, we now present to you a short video of FPCI. Please give a round of applause for FPCI. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind everyone here to please share your moments here at CIFP 2017 to our social media accounts by using the hashtag CIFP 2017, and don't forget to mention at FPC Indo. Once again, please post your photos, your thoughts, and share them with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram using the hashtag CIFP 2017 and mention us at FPC Indo. Ladies and gentlemen, as a non-government and non-partisan organization, FPCI works in cooperation with government, embassies, international organizations, and think tanks to continuously promote constructive debate on foreign affairs. And we feel fortunate to share the insight and knowledge of foreign policy professionals from across the spectrum. And ladies and gentlemen, today, as we celebrate ASEAN's 50th anniversary, golden anniversary, we have asked 9 individuals to deliver a prediction for the future development of ASEAN. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from these ambassador, public figures, and students.
Hi, my name is Laura Diolasi. I run the Milken Institute in Asia. We're an American economic think tank. I believe, well, in this 50th anniversary of ASEAN, I'm excited about the region's next 50 years. And I believe ASEAN will only remain competitive to China and India if it competes as a region. As an American think tank, I wanted to say that the US was the first non-ASEAN country to appoint an ambassador to ASEAN. So the United States, while we don't have an ambassador right now, it remains committed to ASEAN, and especially American companies. American companies are very interested in engaging with the region and working with Indonesia for the next 50 years of ASEAN. Well, thank you.
My name is Rasmus Christensen. I'm the Danish ambassador. I would also like to congratulate ASEAN on its 50th anniversary. ASEAN, I think, is a very, very successful integration project in the world. I come from Europe, where we have another example of the same. And it's clear that both Denmark and the European Union is keen to strengthen its relations with ASEAN. And we would also like to see, of course, Indonesia play an even stronger role in promoting further integration. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm the ambassador of New Zealand, and I'd like to congratulate the 50th anniversary of ASEAN. I think there is strength in cohesiveness and unity, and I think that ASEAN will be a future force for the next 50 years. But at the same time, I'd really like to see Indonesia become and reclaim its leadership of ASEAN. It's the largest country in this region. It's the elephant in ASEAN. It's the country which has 40% of the GDP of ASEAN. But my sense is that Indonesia at the moment is reluctant to be a leader in ASEAN. I'd like to see it become more assertive. I'd like to see it become more aggressive, because I think that if Indonesia is willing to lead, then ASEAN will follow, and ASEAN will be much stronger for that. Thank you.
Well, good morning. My name is Ruben. I'm the ambassador of Brazil to Indonesia. I'd like also, following my colleagues, to express my best compliments to ASEAN on reaching 50 years of considerable and important achievements. Mercosur, the group that combines Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay, is getting more and more closer to ASEAN. We're hopeful that this can proceed in the future. On a bilateral point of view, it's good for me being in Indonesia this time, in 2017, representing Brazil in front of a country that share with Brazil, democratic values, considerable population, extended territories, and two countries that are approaching more and more of each other. And I hope this will be good for the international community. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Michael von Ungarn-Sternberg, the German ambassador to Indonesia and also to ASEAN. I congratulate ASEAN on its 50th anniversary. We all know how central ASEAN is for the international order that is already defined by globalization and increasingly will be defined in future in the next 50 years by the effects of globalization. That does not only cover economic aspects, it covers ideologies, health, crime prevention, science, ideas. So it covers a whole range of issues that define our lives. ASEAN will be needed by the international community to harness this globalization, and the other way around, vice versa. The international ASEAN also needs the international community to defend its interests, as Indonesia needs the international community to defend its interests. Therefore, it is important for all of us, not just the ASEAN member states and the region, that ASEAN develops well, and I think Indonesia is playing a pivotal role in that context. On EU-ASEAN relations, I think we need to take in future a more political and strategic view of our relationship and not be as economic-centric as it has been over the last years. Thank you very much.
Hello. Selamat pagi. I'm Pichayapan Chan Pumidon. I'm ambassador of Thailand to Indonesia. As the last person, I guess, I have the benefit of saying the last, but also very difficult to say too, because many people have said all the good things about ASEAN. But for Thailand, as a founding member of ASEAN countries, we all wish for the best and success of ASEAN for the near, present, and the future. However, despite achievements and all the successes for the past 50 years, for the 2008 ASEAN Charter, for the ASEAN Economic Community in 2015, despite all these achievements, ASEAN is progressing slowly. I would like to say that if we say positively, ASEAN is in another next 50 years is going to face real challenges, real difficulties to move forward. So I would like to say that ASEAN, and to use the words of President Trump of the US, ASEAN first. ASEAN must be first. Because if ASEAN is not first, we will not be here. So I would like to say that ASEAN must be first with a focus on 3 R's. The first R is relevance. We must be relevant. We must live to the expectation of people. We must be relevant to the people. We must be relevant to the well-being of ASEAN people. If we are not relevant, we cannot exist. So we have to forego the short-term interest, to look beyond short-term interest, look for the long-term interest, promote the well-being of ASEAN people. Second R is about resilience. We must be able to address the present and emerging issues, challenges of the region and the world. The humanitarian crisis, the South China Sea, the North Korean issues. All these emerging and challenges are very important to ASEAN. Therefore, ASEAN must be resilient. We have done that before. We passed through the financial crisis in 1997, so we must survive the challenges. The last one, we must be responsive. We must be responsive as a regional force and the global force to speak with one voice together. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Calvin Koo, and I'm a student from Southeast Asia Study, Department of International Relations, Universitas Pelita Harapan. Congratulations to ASEAN 50. I hope ASEAN in decades able to strengthen the community of the Southeast Asia people. By what? By down to earth the name of ASEAN to the community itself. Strengthen the people-to-people connection by so-called ASEAN connectivity. And continue crafting identity of being Southeast Asia. In the global level, lastly, in the global level, I hope ASEAN become the global role model of safety, stable, harmony, and prosperous regions, which known with our success story of ASEAN, that transform ASEAN from the regions of conflict into the regions of peace. Thank you. God bless ASEAN.
Thank you for the wonderful and insightful views. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard the predictions from our ambassadors and also future leaders. But what does the people here in Indonesia think of ASEAN? Therefore, we have a short video that has been produced by our very own FPCI chapters for this conference. They want to find out what the people on the street know about ASEAN. Without further ado, here is the video we have prepared just for you.
ASEAN itu kumpulan negara-negara Asia.
Asia.
ASEAN itu negara-negara yang berkepulauan di Asia Tenggara.
ASEAN itu kayak tentang dunia ya.
Organisasi perkumpulan negara-negara di Asia Tenggara.
Ada 300 ya.
15 tahun atau 10 tahun?
Dari 20 tahunan sih.
Kayaknya 50 tahun deh. Malaysia, Singapura, Australia,
Indonesia, Malaysia,
Singapura, Filipina, Thailand, dan lain-lain.
Rodrigo Duterte.
Khairi Jamaluddin.
Halimah Yacob.
Halimah Yacob ya, itu.
Korea Utara.
Iya. Nggak ada.
Rohingya.
Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
Ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that quite a video? Please give your applause for the FPCI chapters who have made that video possible. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to the opening speeches, I would to kindly invite to the stage the founder of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, Ambassador Dino Patijalal, the Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN, His Excellency Dr. Mohtan, the Director General for ASEAN Cooperation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Jose Tavares, the Minister for Youth and Sport Malaysia, Mr. Hairi Jamaluddin Abu Bakar, and the Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore, Professor Kishore Mahbubani. Please give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Assalamualaikum. So we're going to do something very simple, and this is a tradition of FPCI events. We are going to do a 1-minute standing ovation, except that today we do a standing ovation for ASEAN 50 years. So is the video clip ready? Everybody? Timer udah semua? Bisa ditaruh di atas? Okay, everybody rise up and clap for 1 minute for ASEAN. Come on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please, Badino, don't go anywhere and please remain on stage. For ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker here today should be well known to all of you. He is the former ambassador of Indonesia to the United States and also the former vice minister of foreign affairs. And most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, he is the founder of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. Please welcome Ambassador Dino Patijalal.
Thank you very much. Minister Hairi Jamaluddin, my good friend, Pak Kishore Mahbubani, Deputy Secretary General, Pak Mohtar, my good friend Dirjen ASEAN, Pak Jose Tavares, ambassadors, my dad, who's sitting in the back, FPCI chapters, members of the general public, and all friends, thank you very much for being here. And I'm very pleased to say that this has been said to be the world's largest foreign policy conference. So I think we deserve. Good. And I want to thank the FPCI chapter from all across Indonesia. There are hundreds of volunteers here who work very hard and tirelessly to produce this conference. So thank you to all of them. And I want to say also happy 50 years ASEAN. Is my slides on the screen? Oh, sorry. Happy 50 years ASEAN. And also I want to say happy 150 years to Canada this year. Let's give a big hand to Canada. I think the ambassador is here someplace. Ambassador, thank you. Yeah, I studied in Canada for 5 years. It's a very awesome country. Right? As we celebrate ASEAN 50 years, I think the last thing we should do is take it for granted. 50 years ago, around the time when ASEAN was born, Southeast Asia was pretty messed up. We had wars, we had proxy wars, we had confrontasi, interventions, genocide, we had insurgents, separatism. About 4 million people died in wars and conflicts in Southeast Asia in the 60s and 70s. 4 million people, can you imagine that? You know, it was a very violent and divided region, not just geographically, but also ideologically. There was a lot of animosity and mistrust within Southeast Asia. Any country in this region would feel some degree of regional anxiety and insecurity towards another. And there was a lot of poverty as well. Singapore's per capita was about as low as Jamaica at the time. Now Singapore's per capita is about 27 times more than it was in 1960s. So there was minimal contact between peoples and dysfunctional regional cooperation. A lot of things that we tried just did not work. So in short, Southeast Asia was in a bad shape. You know, just like this guy, you know, he looks pretty beat up, right? 50 years later, ASEAN looks much better. From this guy that looks beat up to become these guys, right? By the way, that's Khairi Jamaluddin, Minister of Youth in Malaysia on the right hand. We both were in a boy band together, but then Malaysia beat Indonesia in badminton, and I never spoke with him again since after that. Back to ASEAN, you know, the regional experiment called ASEAN indeed became a miracle. Beyond anyone's expectation, ASEAN 5 became 6, became 8, became 9, and finally became ASEAN 10. A divided region became united, mistrust was replaced with cooperation, peace replaced war, cooperation replaced confrontation. And the socio-economic story was equally remarkable. ASEAN's population grew 350%. Life expectancy grew 15 years to 71 years. ASEAN GDP growth grew 128 times. ASEAN's trade grew 228 times. ASEAN's income per capita grew 33 times from $122 to about $4,000 in 2016. And this is probably going to continue because while ASEAN is getting older, ASEAN is also staying younger. I mean, if you look at this chart, most of ASEAN, except Singapore and Thailand, sorry Pak Kishore and Ambassador of Thailand, is younger in median age compared to China, United States, UK, South Korea, France, Germany, and Japan. And this is something that is going to continue. ASEAN will remain relatively young until 2065. The yellows are ASEAN, and the blue are the non-ASEAN countries. So in short, Southeast Asia has become a region of peace, progress, and cooperation. And ASEAN is one of the most successful regional organizations in the world. And what is the secret recipe for ASEAN success? By the way, that's not my wife, because my wife and cooking are two entirely different things, right? So. Few things. Secret recipe for ASEAN's success. One is equality. This is best embodied in the relationship between President Suharto and Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. One was leader of the largest country, the other one of ASEAN's smallest country. But both stood and sat as equals. No one was dominant, no one was subjugated, no one could force a decision on any other. And all decisions in ASEAN, in fact, are made by consensus. And the second recipe is pragmatism. In the European Union, for example, to become a member, you have to have political uniformity. You have to be a democracy, and you have to embrace free market. But ASEAN is a different model. In ASEAN, you have all sorts of political systems. You have democracies, you have semi-democracies, you have socialist governments, you have communist governments, you have monarchies. ASEAN is very pragmatic. If you belong in this region, then we're going to work with you and we're going to try to solve problems. So that's pragmatism. And next is trust. Yeah, there was the time when Vietnam thought ASEAN was just a Western conspiracy, a Western concoction. There was the time when Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore had bad blood over confrontasi. And same problems with Malaysia and Philippines over Sabah. But for every problem they solved, for every agreement they signed, trust grew, confidence grew, faith in each other grew. And the other recipe is leadership. You know, ASEAN was not something driven from the bottom, not by some NGOs or civil society. It was created at the top by top national leaders who made ASEAN top national priority. They designed ASEAN, these leaders pushed ASEAN, and they elevated ASEAN. It's a top-bottom leaders-led process. They took the risk, they spent the political capital on building ASEAN, and they developed the visions for the region. They called it the ASEAN way, and they were not afraid to be different from other organizations. So these were the secret recipe, maybe not so secret, that led ASEAN to where it is today. But what about the next 50 years, right? What about the next 50 years, the next half century? In my view, the wisest thing to do for us is to avoid being complacent or overconfident. There's still a risk of ASEAN losing dynamism. There's a risk of ASEAN losing direction, eclipsed by bigger players, losing our game. Regeneration of leaders may complicate things. Nationalism within Southeast Asia may not always be compatible with regionalism. So what should be the secret of ASEAN for the next 50 years? Let me offer a few. One is coherence. As the ambassador of Thailand said, this is very important. Whenever ASEAN is pulled in different directions by outside powers, relations with fellow ASEAN has to take precedence over relations with countries outside ASEAN. ASEAN first, he's very right on that. ASEAN's interests, however you define it, must take priority. Secondly, grassrooting. I don't know if this is a word, but I'll make it a word anyways. You know, after 5 decades, because ASEAN is a top-down and sometimes elitist process, ASEAN still has not become household reality at the grassroots. In Indonesia, you know how many people know about the ASEAN economic community? And this is based on my tour across Indonesia and meeting university students and business people. I would say less than 1% would know what ASEAN economic community is about. I remember I had a conversation with Prime Minister Najib of Malaysia, and I asked him, what is Malaysia's figure on how many people would know? And he said, probably less than 5%. And I think that figure also works in this room. So as we saw from Man on the Street video, it was funny, but it was real. We have to get ASEAN more deeper to the bottom. And one example, of course, count how many ASEAN students are studying in Indonesia. Very, very minimal. And third thing is ASEAN has to become a genuine economic community. Intra-ASEAN trade is about 25%, it's pretty good. But if you look at Indonesia, there are quite a few provinces who don't trade at all with ASEAN, right? Isn't that strange? They're right next door, right? Trade is dominated by about 7 or 8 provinces out of 34, right? So we got a lot to do in making ASEAN a genuine economic community. And look at this chart, right? In ASEAN, 6 largest economies constitute 95% of ASEAN economies, right? There you see the scale. And ASEAN needs to figure out what is the next big vision. This is what I think is missing at the moment, right? Sort of every generation of ASEAN leaders has come up with something huge, something visionary, and now after 2015, since the ASEAN community, that next big vision is still elusive. Now, in the last 50 years, each ASEAN country was dealing with nation building, with national identity, with national integrity. In the next 50 years, each and every one of ASEAN countries will have to deal with globalization. And I tell you, globalization is back. Yeah. I am back. Globalization has brought us a strange and unfamiliar world. It is a world whereby the richest man in the world is a Mexican. It is a world whereby the most spoken language in the world is Chinese, not English. And I'm told that the largest English-speaking country in the world will also be Chinese in the coming decades. It is a world where Indian Bollywood is larger than Hollywood. It is a world where the largest producer of oil is not the Middle East, but the United States. And then it is a world whereby the largest company buying airlines now is Lion Air, right? They're not sponsors, they're not telling me to say this. Right. But globalization is experiencing stress now. Oh, is it also a world where China has more billionaires in the United States, yeah? Globalization is having stress now. The world trade has slowed, yeah, since 2011. You see a lot of negative contractions in trade. And you see also the number of protectionist measures being adopted by more and more countries. The blue are the number of protectionist measures until June 17, and the green is compared to 2015. And this is the number for G20 countries, which make up the majority of the world economy. Again, you see the number of harmful protectionist measures rising dramatically through the years. Right? But I would say globalization is again in a stressful, beat-up stage at the moment. However, I would like to stress that while globalization is slowing down, it is not in reverse. People who say there is a period of deglobalization, I think that's not necessarily so, because as you see here in the index, information flow, people flow, capital and trade flow, they keep rising, but rising a lot slower, but they're not reversing. And as you see, cross-border data flow are still surging and connecting more countries. Let me close with 2 points on globalization that I want the young people to know. First is that we Asians are ahead, which means what? Don't act like we are losing, right? This is a chart on who has gained most from globalization, right? Who gained most? The top 1% and the Asian middle class, right? So we are doing quite well. And look at this chart. I'm never tired of showing this chart. This is on how the world youth perceive globalization. And as you see, the countries where the young people are most positive to embrace globalization as positive for their future is China, 91%, India, 87%, Brazil, and so on. And the United States is at 71%. Even my friend said that this number is too high. But the point is, hey, these are the countries that you are competing with. If you are feeling pessimistic and lacking confidence, you are losing half the battle already. And another thing is, I want to tell you the next big thing is upon us. In 1980, I got a hold of my first email, but little did I know that that little machine would change the world forever. We had the internet economy, trillions of dollars of money going into the world economy that changed everything, revolutionized everything. And what we have here now is the next big thing is upon us. Just as much as the next big thing was email, this time around it will be something more powerful. Artificial intelligence, big data, robotics, the Internet of Things, 3D printing, fintech, driverless car, genomics, genetic editing, quantum computing, digitization, automation, and God knows what else. And I can't even tell you how this is going to change our world the same way the internet and emails change our world. But what I do know, it is a world of permanent and accelerated disruptions. And what I do know is this, as my final point, that this is a challenge for Indonesian foreign policy. It's not just the geopolitics. It's not just the trade and investment. It is how do we prepare for an era which is going to be so disruptive that we need to find a way to effectively turn foreign policy into a tool to extract the coming resources of globalization. Right now, as in many other countries, the right hand, the left hand, the right leg, the left leg, the head are not talking to each other. Finance policies, information policies, foreign policy, labor policy, immigration policy, they are separated. We cannot afford this in the next big thing that will hit globalization. And I'm sure if we put our minds to it, we can finally have not just diplomacy bebas aktif, but also diplomacy bebas aktif and creative. I thank you very much for coming, and God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Dino Patijalal. Thank you, Ambassador Jalal, for your speech. And ladies and gentlemen, every year, FPCI gives a special appreciation for those who have shown contribution and achievement in promoting global issues. And ladies and gentlemen, this year, FPCI will once again announce the award for Indonesian internationalism to an outstanding Indonesian individual. And right now, I would like to invite two FPCI chapters representatives to come to the stage to announce the winner. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome Alfie and Joel.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
This year, FPCI will again announce the winner for the Outstanding Indonesia Internationalism Award.
This award was chosen through a vote by the FPCI chapters all across Indonesia.
The FPCI chapters were asked to select an Indonesian figure from any field of work that has shown remarkable dedication and achievements in advancing Indonesia's role in the international arena.
By such a vote by the FPCI chapters, we are pleased to announce that the winner of the Outstanding Indonesian Internationalism Award is
the former Minister of Foreign Affairs and former permanent representatives to the United Nations,
the former ambassador to the United Kingdom and Ireland,
former Director General of ASEAN Ministry of Foreign Affairs,
and the former spokesman to the Foreign Ministry.
And the Outstanding Indonesia International Award goes to His Excellency Dr. Marty Natalegawa.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Bapak Dino Patijalal yang kami hormati dan kami banggakan, hadirin yang kami muliakan, dan terutama anggota FPCI di seluruh pelosok tanah air. Dari lubuk hati terdalam, from the very bottom of my heart, I would like to thank you very much for the honor that you have conferred upon me. I feel extremely humbled by the entire recognition, but most of all and not least of all, I feel inspired to continue to do what I can in promotion of humanity, in promotion of our common interests. Essentially, ours is a world that is extremely complex, where national, regional, and global developments are very much interlinked. How can one promote a national perspective, a love for one's country, while at the same time promoting it in a setting that is truly globalized, where humanity must be one of our foremost concern. I have every confidence that the FPCI will continue to make its tremendous contribution as it has under the able leadership of Ambassador Dino Patijalal. Thank you very much once again for such an honor, and I am truly regretful that I cannot be with you all this morning, since I have a task here in New York that I have to implement. Thank you very much indeed.
The FPCI and the FPCI chapters would like to thank Mr. Martin Natalegawa for his outstanding service for Indonesia and for being an inspiration for all the people in Indonesia.
We will keep this award and give it to Mr. Martin Natalegawa once he arrives in Jakarta. Thank you.
And may God bless Dr. Martin Natalegawa.
Thank you, Alfie and Joel, for presenting the award. And congratulations to Dr. Martin Natalegawa. May I have another round of applause? Ladies and gentlemen, Her Excellency Minister of Foreign Affairs, Retno Marsudi, could not be here today, but she has been very gracious by sending us this video of her remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Her Excellency Minister of Foreign Affairs, Retno Marsudi.
Hi, I'm Retno Marsudi. My apology for not being able to attend this very important gathering. I have to attend the Foreign Minister meeting of D8 and to accompany the Vice President of the Republic of Indonesia to attend the D8 summit in Istanbul. My congratulations for the foreign policy community in Indonesia to have this very important gathering. And of course, my congratulations goes to Pak Dino Patijalal, who initiated this conference. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, today you are going to discuss about ASEAN. This year is very important year of ASEAN. We celebrated our 50th anniversary. And people always ask, what did ASEAN achieve in the past 50 years? I said, we achieved a lot. Though sometimes you can read it, you can see it in the media, on the news. But in fact, we did achieve a lot of things. I just want to pick up one or two examples of the major achievement of ASEAN. I think you will agree with me if I said that ASEAN is able to create an ecosystem for peace, stability, and prosperity. Please compare the stability and peace that materialize in Southeast Asia. And ASEAN is the motor of this kind of ecosystem. On the prosperity, we see the economic growth in the ASEAN countries. Effortlessly, the growth that we enjoy is much or above the efforts of the world growth. Another achievement of ASEAN is the value of dialogue. We are trying our best to mainstream, to always adopt the value of dialogue, because only by dialogue then we could bridge all the differences. And this is one of the achievements that we would like, of course, to maintain. And ASEAN is able to provide a platform for our partners, for major powers to discuss any issue, even it is a very sensitive issue, with using the value of dialogue. Now, the question is, what will be next? What ASEAN will do in the next 50 years? First is, of course, we have to make ourselves, the ASEAN, get stronger. Reintegration, the regional integration will continue. And, of course, how ASEAN can contribute to the world. To contribute to the world, there is one thing that is very important for ASEAN. That is unity, centrality, and solidarity. Unity, centrality, and solidarity is not a given. We have to nurture it. And to have them, we need a collective leadership. Of course, as the largest economy in ASEAN, as the biggest country in terms of population, Indonesia is committed to contribute more, but again, to make ASEAN able to contribute to the world, we need a collective leadership. Because without collective leadership, then that will be very difficult for us to have the unity, centrality, and solidarity. Let me just pick up one thing on the solidarity issue and what Indonesia did in the past. Actually, I want to share, starting from Marawi, from Sulu Water and its surrounding, and also the humanitarian crisis in Rakhine State. But let me just pick up the very last one, how Indonesia, and together with other ASEAN countries, is trying to convey our concern to Myanmar, as well as to offer our assistance to Myanmar. That's why 9 days after the attack, the attack to some police station in Rakhine State, 9 days after that, on the 4th of September, I was in Myanmar. I was in Dhaka on the 5th of September. First is, of course, Indonesia expressed its concern on the situation. But Indonesia also offered assistance, how to make the situation, or how to prevent the situation from worsening. And at that time, I also discussed about the possibility of ASEAN to get involved on the humanitarian relief. Alhamdulillah, thanks God, that last week, the assistance of ASEAN have been distributed in Myanmar. So once again, unity, centrality, and solidarity of ASEAN is very important, and it must be nurtured. Since this conference is attended by the young generation of ASEAN, I would like to express my hope that the young generation of ASEAN must understand the strategic value of ASEAN for Indonesia, for the region, as well as for the world. And ASEAN must bring also benefit for everybody, for the people, because the people is the center of ASEAN, the center attention of ASEAN. So once again, congratulations, and I do hope that you will have a very fruitful and constructive discussion about ASEAN. And I look forward to receiving any input that materialize from this conference. Once again, thank you and my congratulations.
We thank the Minister for sending those insightful comments and inspiring words. Once again, please give an applause for Her Excellency Mrs. Retno Marsudi. Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to announce that last year, in 2016, the MURI, National House of Records, has named the Conference on Indonesian Foreign Policy the largest conference on Indonesian foreign policy in the world. Please give a round of applause for CIFP. And looking at our audience today, I am pretty sure that we will again break that record. Thank you to all attendees and participants of CIFP 27. And now to our keynote speakers. We are very fortunate to have with us today one of the foremost thinkers on foreign policy matters. Professor Kishore Mahbubani is the Dean and Professor in the Practice of Public Policy of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. He previously served for 33 years in Singapore's diplomatic service and is recognized as an expert on Asian and world affairs. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Kishore Mahbubani. Professor Kishore, while you make your way to the stage, we have a brief tribute for your career.
Selamat pagi. It's such a pleasure to be here. I must say it's very dangerous to have a video like that because it raises your expectations so much. After this, you'll all be disappointed. But I want to say that I'm very happy to be here at the world's largest foreign policy conference. And I must say, it's truly impressive what Dino has done in such a short period of time in raising the awareness of young Indonesians on the importance of foreign policy. A round of applause for Dino. And you want to know how well I know Dino? I'm actually a very good friend of his father who's here too. So a special round of applause for Hashim who's here too. Now, I know you're going to hear lots of speeches, right? And at the end of the day, you'll be scratching your head wondering, what did I hear, you know? So to make it easy for you, I'm only going to make 3 big points, and I hope you'll remember the 3 big points at the end of the day. The first big point is that this is the best time to be alive in human history. There is no better time ever in the history of planet Earth. The second point is that this is going to be the Asian century, and you'll be participating in it. And my third point is to reinforce what has been said already by so many people, including Gino and Foreign Minister Retno, that ASEAN is a miracle. And to show how much I believe in it, I actually produced a book, The ASEAN Miracle. And I was very happy this morning, for the first time, to see the Indonesian translation, which is Keajaiban ASEAN. So we have an Indonesian edition now also of the book. Now I'm going to cover these 3 points in 15 minutes or so. The first point is actually a very critical point. I say this because if you open the newspapers every day, as you know, you only get bad news. But no one tells you that, you know, human society has been around for 5,000 years, that we have made more progress in the last 30 years than the past 3,000 years. And it's amazing how few people are aware
that the human condition has never been better. And let me just give you some statistics to indicate how much better off we human beings are on planet Earth. Take the most distressing thing for any human being is to suffer poverty. In 1970, 3 years after ASEAN was born, 60% of the world's population was suffering from poverty. 60%. Guess what? Today it's less than 10%. More than half the world's population has been rescued from poverty. The global literacy rates have gone up from 55% to almost 90%. The infant mortality rates, and these are a very telling indicator because the most vulnerable citizens of any society are the babies. When the society suffers, babies die, and today less and less babies are dying. And so as a result of that, we have today a human condition that is the best that we've ever had. You saw some of it has spread to ASEAN. You saw this in Dino's statistics. But let me give you one statistic about the global middle class population, which is that in 2010, the total figure was 1.8 billion. By 2020, the figure is going to become 3.2 billion. By 2030, it's going to become 4.9 billion, which means by 2030, more than half the world's population is going to enjoy middle-class living standards. So it's amazing that we're living in an era of great prosperity and progress. But why don't we hear about this? And here is a very critical point I want to leave with you. The reason why you don't hear about this is that the global media is dominated by the Western media. And as you know, societies in the West are feeling pessimistic about the future. And their pessimism is infecting us. So I must say, I strongly endorse what Dino has been saying. Be optimistic and look ahead with great confidence because a great future is coming our way. And this brings me to my second point, which is that we're going to see the Asian century. And I want to emphasize that this is not the rise of Asia, but the return of Asia. And why do I say the return of Asia? Because from the year 1 to the year 1820, for 1800 out of the last 2,000 years, the two largest economies of the world were always those of China and India. It's only in the last 200 years that Europe took off and America took off. But if you view the past 200 years of world history against the backdrop of the past 2,000 years of world history, the past 200 years of world history have been a major aberration. All aberrations come to a natural end, so it's perfectly natural to see the return of China and India and the rest of Asia. But of course, it's happening very fast. Just to give you one more statistic. In 1980, right, United States share of the global GNP in PPP terms was 25%. China's share was 2.2%, less than 10% of United States. But 34 years later, in 2014, China's share of the global GNP became bigger than that of United States. And it's been amazing that this has happened in 3 decades. And this is going to carry on. and the share, global share, Asian share of the global GNP will keep rising. So why is it happening? And here, if you want to be completely fair, we in Asia should thank the Western countries for sharing with us some of the best principles of Western wisdom. And in my previous books, I talk about the 7 pillars of Western wisdom. Let me just mention 2. First is free markets. And if you want to understand the power of free markets, look at China. China was a closed economy under Mao Zedong. It went nowhere. And then Deng Xiaoping came, opened up China. You had free market economics, and China became the world's largest economy. And this is a very critical point to support what Dino said about keeping our societies open to globalization. Because if you close your societies, you will go backwards. If you open your societies, you will go forward. And the tragedy for us is that the Western countries that used to be the biggest promoters of globalization are losing faith in it. So we in Asia, therefore, now have a responsibility to become the custodians of globalization and to be the promoters of globalization. And this is where I would say this conference is therefore extremely important in putting that message across. And I can also mention, of course, another pillar of Western wisdom is mastery of science and technology. And I am sure that you all realize the importance of this. But all this also, frankly, brings me to my third point, which is about ASEAN. The reason why I wrote this book, The ASEAN Miracle, this year, is that people don't understand how amazing ASEAN's success is. To some extent, Dino described it very well when he put up the statistics. And remember, in the 60s and 70s, 4 million people died in this region. So how did a region which saw more conflicts than the Middle East suddenly become so peaceful? I give the answer in the book. I say it's due to the fear that the countries had of communism, it's due to luck, and it's due to one other factor, by the way, which will surprise all of you, especially many of you young people. The third factor was an English word, it is spelled G-O-L-F, golf. Golf played a very critical role in bringing the ASEAN countries together. And I remember playing golf here in Jakarta during ASEAN meetings. But that was the past 50 years. Here I'm glad that Dino and Minister Retno spoke about the next 50 years. And I want to leave behind one last thought with you. Don't take ASEAN's success for granted. There are many challenges coming our way. And I'll just mention one big challenge that your generation will have to think about. There will be rising geopolitical competition between United States and China in the next 2 decades. You don't have to be a political genius to see it coming. And when it comes, the organization that is most under threat is ASEAN. Because some ASEAN countries will lean one way, other ASEAN countries will lean another way, and that will be a big threat. So we, therefore, need to strengthen ASEAN now in anticipation of this challenge
that is coming. And here, I would say the responsibility on young Indonesians is far greater because Indonesia, as you know, is the most populous country within ASEAN. Indonesian leadership is critical. Your leadership is critical. Indeed, it was Indonesia's generosity in sharing its culture of musyafara and mufakat, consultation and consensus that brought ASEAN together in the first 50 years. I hope Indonesia will continue to share this culture and continue to provide leadership for ASEAN in the next 50 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kishore. And a quick reminder that Professor Kishore will be available during the lunch hour at the FPCI booth just outside the main hall to sign his latest book titled The ASEAN Miracle. And don't worry, copies of the book will be available both in English and Bahasa Indonesia will be on sale. And ladies and gentlemen, as ASEAN sets its sight on the next half century, issues affecting youth will be paramount. It may come somewhat of a shock to some of you in the audience to learn that more than half of ASEAN's population, 629 million and counting, are under the age of 30. Engaging youth in the critical global challenges of our time is fundamental to the development and prosperity of the region. And for this reason, we are very fortunate to hear from our next speaker, one of the youngest and most dynamic leaders in the ASEAN region, His Excellency Mr. Hairi Jamaluddin Abu Bakar. Mr. Hairi Jamaluddin is Minister of Youth and Sports Malaysia and a Member of Parliament representing the Rembau constituency in Negeri Sembilan. He is also leader of UMNO Youth and the chairman of Barisan Nasional Youth. Prior to entering politics, he has worked as a journalist, policy aide, and investment banker. Mr. Hairi was educated at the universities of Oxford and London. The World Economic Forum in Davos selected him as a young global leader in 2005, and he was made an Asia 21 Fellow by the Asia Society in 2006. Mr. Hairi was also selected as visiting fellow at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies in 2002. And in 2012, he was appointed as chairman of the National Entrepreneurs Development Corporation. And currently, ladies and gentlemen, he serves as an airborne paratrooper and commander of the 508 Regiment in the Malaysian Territorial Army. He is married to Nori Abdullah, and they have 3 sons, Jibril Cougar Ali, Timur Puma Abdullah, and Raif Leo Averos. He may be over 30, but not much. Please give a warm welcome to His Excellency Mr. Hairi Jamaluddin Abu Bakar.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Bapak Dino, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank Pak Dino and the organizing committee for the Conference on Indonesian Foreign Policy for organizing this. I was always wondering how to make foreign policy more exciting and sexy. And I think Pak Dino is the only person in the world, probably, who can make something like foreign policy exciting and sexy. And I love the way you started the conference with songs. And I think this is something that ASEAN should practice. If we start ASEAN conferences with We Are the World, especially conferences on the South China Sea, I think we can solve the problem. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I want to echo what Dino and Professor Kishore mentioned about the optimism for ASEAN. But I want to focus on a few things, and I want to focus on the future of ASEAN and some of the things that are important for most of the people in the audience today, young Indonesians, young ASEAN citizens. I want to start off with asking a question about what can we get out of ASEAN? because as young people, and we saw the video of the man on the street earlier, don't know very much about ASEAN. So the first thing that we need to ask ourselves is, what is in it for me? What can I get from ASEAN? And I think there are many things that we can get from ASEAN. There are many opportunities that we can get from ASEAN. I want to focus on one thing first, which is opportunities for young people in business. And this is really about grassrooting ASEAN, term that was invented by Dino. Maksudnya, we want to see what ASEAN can mean for us as a small business person, as an example of ASEAN and the opportunity that ASEAN brings. I want to start by saying that ASEAN presents a tremendous opportunity for young people, especially small, medium businesses, and in e-commerce. The e-commerce market in ASEAN is set to increase by 15 times over the next 10 years. ASEAN has the potential to be one of the top 5 digital economies in the world by the year 2025. And why do I say this? We need to leverage this because this is the first digital generation of ASEAN. All of you, including myself, we live our lives through our mobile devices. In ASEAN, 133% of our population have mobile penetration or ownership of mobile phones, which means we own more than one phone. And that is the tremendous opportunity that presents itself from ASEAN. And I say tremendous opportunity because we haven't fully leveraged on it yet. Consider the fact that ASEAN SMEs represent about 95% of enterprises in this region are small and medium businesses. But at the same time, exports by SMEs in the region is about 10 to 30%. So the growth potential for small businesses and e-commerce is tremendous. And this is something that you can look at and say, this is something for me. I want to set up a business which leverages on the seamless connectivity, a large market of 600 to 700 million people, and a market which can only grow, and a market that makes sense to me as a young person. So the first thing that I want to tell you is that ASEAN makes sense to us. It makes sense to us, not just to the politicians, not just to the diplomats, not just through the communiques, but it makes sense to us. Consider the fact that a Malaysian company, Grab, has now decided to expand its business, not in Malaysia, but here in Indonesia. It acquired a company called Kudo, an e-commerce startup, by connecting people who are offline to their online businesses. And they've invested about $700 million in Indonesia. This is an idea of an ASEAN company looking at the ASEAN market, connecting people who are not connected, and making sure that they leverage on it. That's today. Those are the opportunities that you have today. But the second point that I want to make is we have to look into the future. What are the upcoming challenges for us collectively as ASEAN? I want you to project ASEAN for the next 30 to 50 years. Understand that these big trends are trends that we have to collectively confront together. Trends which we need to understand to future-proof ASEAN. Dino, Kishore both spoke about not taking ASEAN for granted. And that means future-proofing our region. That means understanding the changes that are going to come over the next 30 to 50 years. Urbanization. Consider the fact that global urban population will increase to 70%. 70% of the world's population will live in cities by the year 2050. You'll have new megacities with more than 5 million people in ASEAN. For instance, in Batam, Denpasar, Vientiane, Tasikmalaya, all these cities will rise over the next 20 to 30 years. Limited resources, food and water. At least 1 billion people in Asia will have a shortage of water over the next 20 years. The environment, an increase of more than 50% of greenhouse gases emission by 2050, driven by energy demand. How do we ensure that in ASEAN we keep our greenhouse gas emission and carbon footprint down? An aging population. Yes, Dino said that ASEAN is still young. Half of our population is under the age of 30, but over the next 30 to 50 years, we become an aging population. How do we deal with that? How do we pay for an aging population? Healthcare, pensions, all of us, young still, but we don't imagine how we have to deal with an aging population over the next 20 to 30 years. And of course, geopolitical change. ASEAN will become a partner, not just the world, but how do we balance the rivalry that happens in this part of the world? What I want to say from this, second point, is we need to project into the future and understand. And that is what Dino said just now, the next big thing. The next big thing for ASEAN is to actually have this roadmap for the future. Malaysia has done it. We have this National Transformation 2050, looking at the next 30 years and mapping our strategy. I know Singapore has it through their Smart Nation initiative. The ASEAN has to have this as well. Imagining ASEAN in the next 50 years. The next big thing, Internet of Things, genomics, and all these things, augmented reality, and how we together should start investing in common areas of research into renewable energy, clean energy, and sustainable development. These are things that we haven't spoken of yet. Next is, of course, how do we increase the seamlessness of ASEAN? I want to be able to be in ASEAN where it's seamless, not just to travel, but to set up business, where we don't have to sign on to the local telecommunications company and pay for a ridiculously expensive mobile data package when we come to other ASEAN countries. I want infrastructure that is seamless. I want us to have an infrastructure plan where we develop and commonly develop our ports, our airports, our railway system, so that it's not just for national interest, but it's for the ASEAN interest, where we increase connectivity. We want to make sure that the ASEAN Connectivity Master Plan makes sense to us. Work together with the Asian Infrastructure Bank, work together with the ADB, work together with the World Bank, work together with everybody who wants to increase connectivity in ASEAN, because the future for ASEAN is to ensure that we are seamless, not just in terms of the harmonization of our customs, our laws, our regulation, but in real terms, in traveling, in communicating, and in connectivity. And that's very important for us. In order to create an ASEAN community, you have to have connectivity as the backbone. My fourth point is we also have to look at non-state challenges. ASEAN for far too long has been looking at ASEAN issues in the context of countries, in the context of businesses, removing trade barriers, increasing cross-border investments. But what now we have to do is to look at non-state challenges, challenges that come from non-state actors and non-state issues. We've done a great job with anti-terrorism, anti-piracy cooperation, but we need to do much more in terms of non-state challenges that come to us. I'll give you 3 examples. One, in terms of migration. Migration patterns will change over the next 30 to 50 years. Over the last 15 years, migration has increased by 41% globally, and that stands to increase as we become freer, as we become more open in terms of our borders, in terms of the free movement of people within ASEAN. We have to deal with how we manage migration in this region. Secondly, challenges of cybersecurity. Now, national borders are not just physical borders anymore. Sovereignty is not just looking after your physical borders, but also your digital and cyber borders. Southeast Asia has the world's 4th largest internet population, but it has some of the most underdeveloped data protection laws and weak adoption of cybersecurity practices. So how do we deal with this? It's again a non-state issue, a new frontier that we have to deal with. And climate change. As I said earlier, we have to commit ourselves to climate change and to reducing our carbon footprint. And how we do this? Collectively. And this is something that is a major problem for ASEAN. Consider the fact that the only landlocked country in ASEAN is Laos. Everyone else has a coastline. So you imagine the rise in the sea level will result in major problems for ASEAN countries, ASEAN capitals, in terms of flooding, in terms of congestion, and in terms of development. So the point that I want to make, the fourth point, is how do we look at threats and challenges that are not traditional, that are not trade, investments, that are not settled at the level of state, but rather non-state actors. Next, I want to touch on the issue of taking ASEAN for granted. I think Kishore mentioned this, and Dino also mentioned this. We must never ever take ASEAN's success for granted. ASEAN has been a success, a tremendous success, but it will not always be so. We need to learn from Brexit and other parts of the world that are turning inwards. Although the ASEAN project is different from the European Union model, it is important that integration in ASEAN is seen to be fair to all participating countries. ASEAN is a diverse group. The standard deviation of income in ASEAN countries is more than 7 times that of EU countries. And then we have a diversity of language, religion. Indonesia, 90% Muslim. Philippines, 90% Roman Catholic. Thailand, 90% Buddhist. How do we tackle these disparities? How do we ensure that we don't take these success for granted? Now, backlash happens, and it's happened in the UK. It's happened in the United States, where people are turning inwards when people feel that they are not getting what they should from the status quo. That is why we need a bottom-up approach for the future of ASEAN. For too long, ASEAN has been top-down, and the future must be written by the people. It must be a bottom-up approach where people feel connected. People feel disconnected to the bureaucracy in Brussels and Europe, and that's why they rejected it, and that's why there was a backlash. The people-to-people agenda that we speak of is not just about creating personal links in ASEAN, but it's also for us to have a stake in the future of ASEAN. Next is we need to move away from historical baggage. We've once been the playground for superpower rivalry, and ASEAN must never again be pawns on a big stage. We are stronger together. We all know if ASEAN is a single entity, it will be the 7th largest in the world in terms of GDP, 2nd largest in terms of inbound FDI, 3rd largest population. We are stronger together. So we need to make sure that ASEAN centrality is the bedrock of our foreign policy. Yes, we must ensure that we remain on friendly terms with the great powers, but we must also spread our linkages, engage with other regions, with Europe, with the Middle East, to ensure that this is not a playground for superpowers and never again are we pawns in a bigger game. And there's great potential for us to expand our relationship with countries which are underdeveloped, for instance, ASEAN and India, ASEAN and the Middle East. We also need, ladies and gentlemen, one of my last points, is a new ASEAN way. What do I mean by a new ASEAN way? We need an ASEAN way which is more honest and more open. While we observe the fundamental ASEAN principle of non-interference, if the domestic affairs of a member country results in instability, which affects other countries in the region, we cannot remain silent. That is why Malaysia has taken a very principled and vocal stand on the Rohingya issue. 1.1 million Rohingyas in the Rakhine state have been denied citizenship and live under apartheid-like conditions. The ethnic cleansing that is being reported in Rakhine state is not just an internal problem for Myanmar. The Rohingyas are fleeing their homeland, and this creates a wave of refugees for other ASEAN countries. There is also a threat of radicalization as terror groups take advantage of the persecution by recruiting those who are being targeted. We must remember, ladies and gentlemen, that we have announced to the world that ASEAN is a community of nations committed to human dignity. Our Human Rights Declaration states that every person has an inherent right to personal liberty and security, a right not to be subjected to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. And now we are being tested in our backyard, in ASEAN itself. Now, do we stay silent? Is this for real? Or are these words just on a piece of paper? That is why ASEAN needs to continue to respect tradition, respect non-interference, but we need to be honest with one another. And we need to speak out, especially when these issues affect us. And that brings me to real ASEAN-ness. Coming back to people relationship, I want us to carve an ASEAN identity. ASEAN is a political construct. It is a political idea. It is a political idea that brought together 5 nations at first, and now 10 nations. How can we move from a political construct to a real identity? How can we start calling ourselves ASEANese or ASEANian? I always introduce myself as I'm Malaysian, but I'm also ASEANese because I want to create that identity. We need to start thinking about what can we do? What can we do to solidify that identity? And I've been thinking long and hard about this. I just hosted the Southeast Asia Games, the SEA Games in Malaysia. And I thought sports was a great way to bring us together, and it is. But also sports is a way of getting our rivalry going a bit out of hand. So I was thinking, how can we bring that power of sports or something to create ASEAN identity so that all of us understand, so that when we ask the man on the street about ASEAN, they know ASEAN is 10 countries. They know ASEAN is 50 years old. I thought about an ASEAN boy band. Maybe Dino and I can get back together again and invite people from Thailand and Laos to join us. ASEAN boy band, be crazy. But something that's close to my heart and something that I think is an idea out of the box, which I think can work, which I've been pushing for the last 5 years, is for ASEAN to host the World Cup or the Olympics. You know, imagine, let's do this. Let's do this. You know, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, other ASEAN countries get together, let's put in a bid. I know the IOC accepting bids from more than one country now. I know the World Cup has accepted a bid from more than one country. Japan and South Korea held the World Cup together. And by the way, if ASEAN holds the World Cup, the Football World Cup, that's the only way our teams are going to qualify for the World Cup, yeah? So it's a good idea that we do this. So, I mean, this might be a crazy idea, you know, but it's a not so crazy idea. Because when we do the SEA Games, we're at each other's throats. But I think when we do this, there's a sense of solidarity. We have to think about bringing ASEAN down to the level of the people, grassrooting it. And I think this is an idea that I hope you can support for us to bring ASEAN to the people. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I want to recognize Indonesia for hosting this conference. Indonesia's leadership role for ASEAN as our representative in G20. PricewaterhouseCoopers forecasted Indonesia to be a top 10 economy in the world by 2050. Now, we need Indonesian leadership. And we want Indonesia to play that leading role, like you once did when we formed ASEAN, to drive ASEAN forward for the next 50 years. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, when ASEAN was formed 50 years ago, not many people gave us a chance. People said that this project is not going to succeed. This project will fail. Too different, too diverse, at each other's throats. But we've shown that 50 years later, we're better together. Let's continue to defy expectations. Let's drive ASEAN for another 50 years. And I look to Indonesia and all the other ASEAN countries in making sure that we can continue to defy expectations. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for all of our speakers for today. Ladies and gentlemen, today I am sure that we will have a great day here at CIFP 2017, filled with interesting discussions and of course with our inspiring speakers. Please once again give a round of applause for our speakers for today. Ladies and gentlemen, before moving on to the remaining sessions, I would like to extend the gratitude of the CIFP 2017 committee to all of our sponsors today. Sinarmas, April, Indonesia Morowali Industrial Park, Mulia Group, Sampurna, the Australian Embassy, Bank Mayapada, MTech, Tokopedia, and our media partner, Net Media Tama. Thank you for all of your generous support. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have 19 parallel sessions that will start in 5 minutes from now, that will be held in 5 different rooms. The sessions will take place here in the main hall and also upstairs in the Curaçao, Aruba, Barbados, and also Grenada rooms. And don't forget to follow our events and also latest updates on your smartphone. All you have to do is just download the app called Alcor Mice from the App Store or the Google Play Store. All you have to do is just download the app, register yourself, and select CIFP 2017. And we'd also like to remind and invite you to attend the closing plenary session that will start at 5:15 p.m. here in the main hall with the theme A Bipartisan Conversation with Indonesian Leaders on the State of the World. The session will feature two speakers, His Excellency Mr. Zulkifli Hasan and Legend TNI Purnawirawan Prabowo Subianto. And you surely do not want to miss the session held at 5:15 p.m. today. And ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to remind you to do not forget to share your moments here at CIFP 2017. Just upload your thoughts and your pictures to Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram using the hashtag CIFP 2017. And don't forget to mention us at FPCI Indo. And ladies and gentlemen, aside from the apparel sessions we will be having, we will also have exhibition booths and also a student lounge. The exhibition booths is located outside around the venue, and the student lounge is located upstairs. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for your attendance and attention. May you have a wonderful and fruitful discussion. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih dan sampai jumpa.
Satu. jadi yang sebelah sana, sebelah stereo. Dia posisinya depan di bangku itu, duduk dia. Sama sekalian mau diinfoin, ntar yang buat home band ada saxophone, mau pakai kabel apa mau pakai wireless nih? Kurang ngerti gue juga. Tadi dia saya nanya sama mbaknya, katanya home band ada saxophone.
Mau mengumumkan pakai
Iya, bener sih. Mbak namanya
mau
siapa?
Ziva.
Kata Mbak Sipa nih.
Kenapa?
Kata Mbak Sipa katanya ada home band pakai saxophone.
Mana?